Her boyfriend left her for another woman. The mafia boss proposed in front of the entire restaurant. The little black dress felt like a lie. It was the only truly expensive thing I owned. Bought on a payment plan after months of saving tips. It was silk, and it clung to my hips in a way that always made Brian's eyes linger. Tonight, I needed his eyes to linger. I needed to remind him of what he had, of what we were. I checked my reflection in the cracked mirror of my studio apartment. Emily Ruiz, 26 years old, waitress, and hopefully, as of tonight, fiancé. A bitter laugh escaped me. Hope was a dangerous thing. Brian had been distant for the past 2 months. His texts were short, his nights at the office grew longer, and the easy laughter we used to share had evaporated, leaving a strained silence in its wake. I told myself it was work. He was an investment broker, or trying to be, and the market was tough. I told myself he was stressed about this dinner, his 30th birthday, and the big step I was convinced he was about to take. I'd even caught a glimpse of a small, velvet blue box in his briefcase last week. He'd snapped it shut when he saw me, a flush rising on his neck. Nerves. It had to be nerves. Tonight's dinner was at the Copper Table. The name tasted like irony. It was a moderately upscale place downtown, all dark wood and glowing amber lights, the kind of place that served foam on plates and charged $50 for 3 scallops. I should know. I'd worked there for 2 years, bussing tables and serving those scallops, just to make ends meet while Brian finished his MBA. I knew the managers, the waiters, even the kitchen crew. I told Brian I'd rather go anywhere else, but he insisted. He wanted to celebrate in style, in front of all our friends. Mark and Sarah were coming, and so were Jason and his new girlfriend. It was a proper celebration. My stomach fluttered, a tangled knot of excitement and a deep, cold dread I refused to name. I reapplied my lipstick, a bold red, a war paint. I grabbed my thin coat. It was October, and the wind off the river was sharp and left my tiny apartment, the place I was so sure I'd be leaving soon for a shared life with him. The restaurant was loud, glittering with the clinking of glasses and the forced, bright laughter of the downtown crowd. Brian was already at the table, a large round booth in the center of the room. He was on his phone, scowling. He didn't stand up when I arrived. "Hey," I said, sliding in beside him and trying to inject a warmth I didn't feel. "Happy birthday." I leaned in to kiss him. He offered his cheek, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Hey, Em, you're late." "It's 7:05, I said, my smile faltering. "The reservation was for 7. "Whatever. Mark and Sarah are already on their second round." He gestured with his chin, and I saw our friends across the table, their smiles looking just as strained as mine felt. "Emily, you look stunning," Sarah gushed, her eyes wide. She knew. She knew things had been weird. "Thanks, you too." I tried to settle in, to shake off the cold welcome. Maybe he was just in a bad mood. I smoothed the black silk over my lap, my hands trembling slightly. The dinner was awful. Brian barely spoke to me, instead engaging in loud, brash conversations with Mark about stocks. Every time I tried to join in, he cut me off or talk over me as if I wasn't there. I felt a familiar heat rising in my face, the sting of public invisibility. I was the wallpaper, the quiet, supportive girlfriend who paid her half of the rent on time with crumpled tips and never complained. I focused on my food, the food I used to serve, pushing it around my plate. My old colleague, a waiter named Javier, gave me a sympathetic look as he refilled my water. I just gave him a small, tight-lipped smile. "I'm fine." It was meant to say, "We're fine." Then, dessert menus were cleared, and Brian stood up. He tapped his champagne flute with a knife. The table went quiet. This was it. My heart didn't pound. It just stopped. All the air left my lungs. I looked up at him, composing my face into what I hoped was surprised joy. "Thank you all for coming," Brian began, his voice overly formal. He'd had too much to drink. Turning 30 is a big deal. It's a time when a man has to evaluate, to figure out what he really wants, what his future looks like. He looked directly at me. My breath hitched. "And Emily," he said, his voice dropping, but not with intimacy. It was cold. You've been great for the last 4 years, really supportive. I could feel Sarah's hand gripping her napkin under the table. The dread I'd been ignoring all night burst open, flooding my veins with ice. But a man's future isn't about support, he continued, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. It's about vision. It's about finding someone who elevates you, someone who is on your level. Brian, Mark said, his voice a low warning. Don't. No. I want to be honest. I'm tired of hiding. It's not working. We're done. The words just hung there. Done. In the middle of the restaurant, in front of our friends, on his birthday, I just stared at him. I couldn't feel my face. I heard Sarah gasp, a sharp, choked sound. And since I'm being honest, Brian said, his voice rising with a performer's bravado, I want to introduce you all to the real reason I'm celebrating. He gestured across the restaurant. A woman stood up from a smaller table. She was stunning in a way I never would be, all blonde highlights, surgically perfect features, and a dress that probably cost more than my apartment's deposit. She glided over, smiling, and slid her hand into Brian's. This is Kendra, he said, beaming. You guys have probably seen her stream. She's got, 2 million followers now, babe? Kendra, the influencer. I'd seen her pop up on his feed. I told myself it was just content. I looked at Brian. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at her. And in that moment, I understood. The distance. The late nights. The velvet box I'd seen wasn't for me. It was already on her finger. A diamond so large it looked fake. I felt nothing. It was a strange, terrifying vacuum. The chatter of the restaurant faded to a dull roar. The amber lights seemed to pulse, making me nauseous. I saw Mark's face, a mask of fury. I saw Sarah, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I saw Kendra, looking at me with an expression of bored pity. And I saw Brian, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. I did not cry. I would not give him that. Slowly, I slid my chair back. The legs scraped against the wood floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the bubble of silence around our table. I stood up. I looked at Brian, my gaze level. I see, I said. My voice was a whisper, but it was perfectly clear. Happy birthday, Brian. I picked up my purse. I didn't grab my coat. I turned. And with a dignity I didn't know I possessed, I walked out of the restaurant. I passed Javier, who looked horrified. I passed the hostess stand. I walked through the heavy oak doors and into the cold October night. I didn't look back. In the darkest, most secluded booth in the back corner of the restaurant, a man sat, untouched by the drama. He hadn't looked away from the table once. Dante Moretti didn't like public scenes, but he respected quiet strength. He had watched the girl, the waitress, he'd assumed, from the way she'd spoken to the waiter, handle the most brutal, public humiliation he'd ever witnessed with a kind of frozen grace. She hadn't thrown a drink. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. She had simply erased herself, taking her dignity with her. It was the kind of strength he understood, the kind of strength he valued. He watched her walk out, her back straight, her head high. He saw the tremor in her hands. Javier, the waiter, walked past his booth, his face white with anger. Javier, Dante said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the din of the restaurant and stopped the waiter cold. Javier turned, his eyes wide with a fear that hadn't been there a moment before. Mr. Moretti, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Can I get you something? Dante leaned forward, just an inch, into the low light, his 2 bodyguards silent as statues at the adjoining table. Didn't even blink. The girl, Dante said, his voice like gravel. The one who just left. Who is she? Her? That's Emily. Emily Ruiz. She used to work here. Javier stammered. A good kid. That guy, Brian, he's a real piece of work. Emily Ruiz, Dante repeated, committing the name to memory. He settled back into the shadows of the booth. Thank you. Javier, that will be all. Yes, Mr. Moretti. Javier practically ran to the kitchen. Dante watched the table in the center of the room, the influencer, Kendra was laughing loudly, while the man, Brian, looked smug. Their friends were pointedly, angrily getting their coats. Dante pulled out his phone and sent a text to a number not saved in his contacts. "Find Emily Ruiz. Get me everything and then have Russo pick me up. I'm done here." I walked for 10 blocks before the numbness shattered. It happened all at once. The cold air hit my lungs, and a sound tore out of my throat, a strangled, dry sob that hurt my chest. The tears came, hot and blinding, turning the city streetlights into a blurry, indifferent smear. Done. 4 years of my life. 4 years of working double shifts at the diner to cover our groceries when he was between jobs. 4 years of believing in his potential, of shrinking myself so he could feel big. Done. For an influencer. In front of everyone I knew. I was so stupid, so blind. I wasn't even heading home. I was just walking. My feet, in their impractical heels, ached. I'd left my coat. I was freezing, the silk dress offering no protection against the wind that whipped down the concrete canyons. I cut down a side street, a familiar shortcut from the diner. It was dark, smelling of dumpsters and stale beer, but it shaved 5 minutes off my walk. Tonight. I didn't care. I was halfway down the alley when a shape detached itself from a recessed doorway. "Hey, pretty thing, what's the hurry?" I froze. A man, large and shapeless in the dark, stepped in front of me. He smelled awful. Like the alley. "Please," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. "Just let me by." "Oh, I'll let you by," he sneered. "After you give me that purse. And maybe that pretty little dress." He lunged, and I saw the glint of a pocket knife in his hand. I screamed. It was a raw, terrified sound. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a crack, and I fell hard against the brick wall. Before he could take another step, the alley was flooded with blinding white light. A low, guttural engine growl echoed off the walls. A massive, gleaming black SUV had pulled into the alley entrance, blocking it completely. Its high beams pinned us, turning the mugger and me into terrified actors on a stage. The mugger froze, shielding his eyes. What the hell? The SUV just idled. It was silent, menacing, a void. The man looked at the vehicle, then at me, then back at the vehicle. He made a decision. He spat a curse, turned, and scrambled over a chain-link fence at the other end of the alley, disappearing into the darkness. I was alone. Left with the idling truck and my own hammering heart, I slid down the wall, my knees too weak to hold me. I was shaking so hard I thought my teeth would crack. The SUV didn't move. The doors didn't open. The windows, tinted black, revealed nothing. It just sat there, its engine a low, protective rumble. It felt like it was watching me, waiting. The fear of the mugger was replaced by a new, stranger, colder fear. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed my purse, and ran. I didn't look back to see if it followed. I just ran, my heels clacking on the pavement, all the way back to my apartment where I bolted the door, slid the chain, and collapsed against the cheap wood, finally letting the night break me. I woke the next morning on the floor, still in my dress. My phone was a wasteland. 23 missed calls from Sarah, 7 angry texts from Brian, accusing me of making a scene. A few confused messages from other friends. I turned it off. I called the diner and left a message, my voice a hoarse croak, saying I had the flu. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Brian's smirk, Kendra's pity. Around noon, my apartment buzzer shrieked. My heart leaped into my throat. Brian, he'd come to... What? Yell at me? Apologize? I buzzed him up, my hands shaking. I didn't know what I wanted. I just wanted the aching to stop. But it wasn't Brian. It was a delivery man, holding the single largest floral arrangement I had ever seen. It was a riot of deep red roses and pristine white lilies, so many that he could barely hold the vase. "Emily Ruiz?" he asked, checking his tablet. "Yes," I whispered. "These are for you." He hefted them into my arms. They were heavy. Who are they from?" "No name," he said, shrugging. "Card just says." "Actually, there's no card at all. Just the address. Have a good one." I shut the door, my heart pounding a different, more confusing rhythm. I set the vase on my small kitchen counter, where it took up all the space. They were beautiful and terrifying. Brian didn't send flowers. He barely remembered my birthday. Mark and Sarah? They couldn't afford this. My mind flashed to the alley, the black SUV, the blinding lights. This wasn't a gift. It was a message. It felt like an intrusion, like someone had seen me at my absolute lowest and decided to... What? Mark their territory? I felt sick. I grabbed the heavy glass vase, flowers and all, carried it down the hall, and shoved it into the communal dumpster in the alley behind my building. I watched the perfect white petals crush against a greasy pizza box. I went back inside and scrubbed my hands until they were raw. I had to work. Rent was due in a week, and I'd lost my coat. I couldn't afford to be sick or scared. The next night, I was back at the diner. The bright fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee and frying onions, the constant yelling of orders. It was my normal. It was my safe place. I tied my apron tight and tried to forget everything. Around 10 p.m., the bell on the diner door chimed, but instead of the usual jingle, it was followed by a sudden, heavy silence. The regulars at the counter stopped talking. Sal, the cook, stuck his head out of the kitchen window. I looked up from pouring a coffee. 4 men walked in. 3 were large, dressed in immaculate dark suits, their eyes scanning the room with a cold, professional disinterest. The man in the lead was different. He was older, maybe in his late 40s. His suit was a charcoal gray that probably cost more than my car. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a stillness that was absolute. His dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and his face... It was a handsome face, but a hard one, carved from stone. He walked past the "Please wait to be seated" sign and slid into the corner booth. My section, I recognized him, not personally, but from the whispers, the stories my father, a man who knew all about shadows and debts, used to tell. Dante Moretti. A name that didn't get spoken in daylight, a name that meant power, money, and danger. My hands started to shake. I picked up my pad and a pencil. "Margie," I whispered to the other waitress. "Can you take that table?" Margie, who was usually tough as nails, was hiding behind the coffee machine. "No way, honey, that's... You don't want to get involved. Just take his order." I swallowed, smoothed my apron, and walked over. "Welcome to the Starlight. What can I get for you?" I tried to keep my voice even. Dante Moretti looked up at me. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they saw everything. It wasn't a sexual gaze. It was an appraisal. Like he was measuring my weight, my worth, my breaking point. He'd been there. He'd been at the copper table. I knew it, with a sudden, sickening certainty. "Coffee," he said. His voice was low, a rumble like gravel stirring. "Black." "Just coffee?" He nodded. Once, his men, in the booth behind him, ordered nothing. They just watched the door. I poured the coffee. My hand was shaking so badly I almost missed the cup. I set it down in front of him. He didn't say thank you. He just watched me. I went back to my other tables, my skin crawling. I could feel his gaze on my back. He sat there for half an hour. He drank the coffee. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Then, as silently as they arrived, he and his men stood up. He left a bill on the table. I waited until the door chimed shut before I went to clear the cup. On the table, folded neatly, was a $100 bill for a $2 cup of coffee. I stared at it. It wasn't a tip. It was a payment. It was a brand. I pocketed the money, my hand trembling, and threw the coffee cup into the bus bin so hard it shattered. That night, the call came. My landlord, Mr. Henderson, a kind, elderly man I'd rented from for 5 years. "Emily, my dear, I'm so sorry. I've sold the building." My blood went cold. "What? Sold it? When?" "It was very fast. A holding company. They're not sentimental. I'm afraid your lease is null. They're raising the rent on all units, effective the 1st. How much?" I whispered. "They're doubling it, Emily. And they require a new security deposit. I'm so sorry. I did the math. I couldn't even make the first month, let alone the deposit. I'd be homeless in 2 weeks." The next day, I was at the bank, the same bank Brian used. I sat across from a loan officer named Mr. Calloway, a man with a perpetually disappointed face. I'd laid out my pay stubs, my diner tips meticulously recorded. I just needed a small loan, $2,000, to tide me over. "I'm sorry, Miss Ruiz," he said, tapping his pen. "Your credit is thin. You have no cosigner, and your debt-to-income ratio with this new rent. It's just not feasible. The computer says no. Please," I begged, the humiliation of the past few days catching up to me. "I've never missed a payment. I work 60 hours a week. I need a little help. Brian, my ex, he left me with—" "I'm sorry," Calloway said, his voice flat. "There's nothing I can do. The application is denied." The tears I'd held back at the restaurant, in the alley, at the diner, they finally came. I put my head in my hands, my shoulders shaking. I was going to be homeless. "Mr. Calloway?" A new voice. A bank manager. Calloway looked up, annoyed. "Yes?" I looked up, wiping my face. Through the glass wall of the office, I saw him, Dante Moretti, when he was standing near the velvet ropes, dressed in that same charcoal suit. He wasn't looking at me. He was talking quietly to the bank manager, a man who was visibly sweating. I see," the manager said, nodding vigorously. "Yes, of course. Right away." The manager hurried back to Calloway's desk and leaned in, whispering, "There's been a flag on this account. A high-priority client has vouched for Miss Ruiz. Run the application again. Use the preferred client referral code." Calloway's face went pale. He looked at me, then at the manager, then back at his computer. He typed, his fingers flying. "Well," he stammered, his entire demeanor changing. My goodness, it seems there was a system error. My apologies, Miss Ruiz. Yes, here we are." He spun the monitor around. "Approved for the full amount at our lowest interest rate. Will that be all?" I was speechless. I stared at the green "approved" on the screen. I signed the papers in a complete daze. The money, he said, would be in my account within the hour. I walked out of the office, my legs like jelly. I looked for him. Dante Moretti was gone. He had vanished like a ghost. I stood on the marble floor of the bank lobby, clutching the approved loan documents. I had the money. I had my apartment. I wasn't saved. I was owned. A black SUV drove past the bank's front window, moving slowly. It didn't stop. It just passed by. The message was clear. He had seen my humiliation. He had saved me from an attack. He had paid my rent. And he hadn't asked for a single thing in return. That was the most terrifying part of all. I walked home, the money in my account feeling heavier than any debt I'd ever known. I was safe from Brian. I was safe from muggers. I was safe from eviction, but for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely terrified. The $2,000 from the bank felt like poison in my account. It covered the new deposit and the first month's doubled rent, but it solved nothing. It was just a different kind of chain. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just worked. I went to the diner, my smile stretched so thin it felt like cracking glass. I scrubbed counters, refilled ketchups, and tried not to jump every time the bell on the door chimed. I was waiting for him. I knew he would be back. It took 3 days. It was late, close to 10 at night, and the diner was empty except for 2 truckers nursing coffee at the counter. The bell chimed, and the familiar, heavy silence fell. Dante Moretti slid into the same corner booth. This time, he was alone. My heart didn't just pound. It felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. Sal, my boss, saw him from the kitchen, took one look at my white face, and immediately vanished into the walk-in freezer. I wiped my damp palms on my apron. This was it. I couldn't live like this, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I walked over, my coffee pot held like a weapon. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was a reedy whisper. He looked up from the menu he hadn't been reading. His dark eyes were unreadable. "I agree." I slid into the booth across from him, an act of foolish bravery. "The bank, the mugger, the flowers, that was you." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" The word was sharp. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? He leaned back, steepling his fingers on the table. He didn't seem surprised or angry. He just was. I saw what happened at the copper table. I saw how you handled it. You saw that. The humiliation washed over me again, hot and sickening. I did, he said, his voice flat. And I saw a woman of substance. Quiet strength. It's rare. That man, Brian, he didn't just discard you. He tried to break you. I don't like bullies. So what? I snapped, my fear turning to a bitter anger. This is a game? You're my new protector? You buy my loan. Send your men to watch me. Scare off. You're stalking me. I am ensuring your safety, he corrected, as if the distinction mattered. That alley was a complication, a coincidence I was able to manage. The bank was a necessity. Your landlord was not going to be reasonable. You don't get to decide what's necessary for me, I said, my voice shaking. I don't want your money. I don't want your help. I want you to leave me alone. He was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Do you? Your rent is paid for this month. What about the next? That diner barely keeps you afloat. The loan I facilitated. We'll have payments due. You're a smart woman, Emily. You know you're drowning. I was doing fine before you. You were a week away from eviction before your boyfriend humiliated you and your rent doubled. You were not fine. You were just quiet about it. He was right. The truth of it sat on me like a stone. I don't like being in your debt, I finally whispered, looking down at the worn-out laminate of the table. Then work for me. My head snapped up. What? I need a part-time private assistant, Marhi said, his tone casual, as if offering me a cup of coffee, clerical work, filing, scheduling, managing some property accounts. It's legitimate. 3 days a week. It pays. Significantly more than this. He gestured to the diner. I stared at him. A job. From him. I can't. Why not? Because of who you are, I said, my voice dropping. My father. He knew men like you. He gambled. He owed men like you money. I know what this world is. I want no part of it. This is not that, he said, his voice hardening just a fraction. It's an office job, in a building downtown. You will never see the side of my life you're referring to. It is a clean offer. Emily. A way for you to pay your own bills. To be independent. Isn't that what you want? He was twisting it, making it sound like a liberation, when it felt like the final click of a trap. No, I said, sliding out of the booth. I can't. Thank you for the loan. I'll pay it back. Now please, leave. I walked away from the table, my legs trembling. I didn't look back to see him leave. The next day, I came in for my shift, and Sal was waiting for me, his face gray. Emily, he said, wringing his hands. I'm so sorry. I have to cut your hours. What? Sal, I need those shifts. Rent just... I know, kid, I know. But the new owners, they're running the numbers. They say I'm overstaffed. They want me to cut back to a skeleton crew. I've got to let you go for the dinner shift. I can only keep you on for lunch. My stomach turned to lead. Lunch shifts. The worst tips. I'd be making half of what I was. I wouldn't even be able to cover my electricity bill, let alone the new rent and the bank loan. Who are they? I asked, my voice hollow. The new owners of the diner? Sal wouldn't meet my eyes. Just a holding company. Kid. Bought it last week. Same as your apartment building. I leaned against the counter, the smell of stale coffee making me gag. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a kind offer. It was a strangulation. He had cut off my air, and now he was the only one selling it. That afternoon, another notice was posted on my apartment door. Not an eviction, not yet. A notice of violation. My doormat was non-compliant. The wreath on my door was a fire code violation. I was being fined $200. I went back inside, sat on my threadbare sofa, and looked at the business card he had left on the diner table. Moretti Holdings, a single phone number. My pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. I picked up my phone, my hand shaking with a rage so deep it felt like sorrow. I had survived Brian, I had survived the mugger, but I wasn't going to survive this. The office was on the 32nd floor of a glass and steel skyscraper. The lobby was all white marble and silent. Expensive-looking art. The plaque on the wall said Moretti Holdings, Global Real Estate Investment. It looked sterile, corporate, safe. The illusion shattered the moment I stepped off the elevator. The receptionist, a woman with hair pulled back so tightly it stretched her skin, looked up. Her smile was a perfect painted red, but her eyes were cold. "Can I help you? I'm Emily Ruiz. I have an appointment with Mr. Moretti. He's expecting you." Her smile didn't waver. "Go right in. Last door on the left." The office was massive, a corner suite with a view of the entire city, from the river to the bridges. Dante Moretti was standing by the window, not in his dark suit, but in a simple, crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He looked less like a specter and more like a man, a very dangerous man. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me a choice," I said, my voice tight. I clutched my purse to my chest. "You bought the diner. You're the one harassing me at my apartment." He turned, and I was taken aback by the look on his face. It wasn't smugness. It was something else. "I did not buy the diner, Emily, and I am not harassing you, but the people who bought your building are aggressive, and they are expanding. I knew they would. I simply anticipated the outcome." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was all a terrible coincidence. But it didn't matter. The result was the same. "What is this job?" Exactly what I said. He gestured to a clean, modern desk in the corner of his office. "You'll work here. You'll manage my personal schedule. You'll handle the paperwork for several properties I own personally. It is quiet work." "And the other side? The one I'm not supposed to see?" "You will not see it," he said, his voice final. I worked there for 3 weeks. It was the strangest 3 weeks of my life. The job itself was easy, boring even. I filed deeds. I answered calls and told insistent people that Mr. Moretti is unavailable. I cross-referenced spreadsheets that tracked rents and maintenance costs for apartment buildings. It was a perfectly normal, high-paying clerical job. But the office was not normal. Men in expensive suits would arrive, not for meetings, but just to stand in Dante's office for 5 minutes, speaking in low, rapid Italian before leaving. A man named Russo, who seemed to be Dante's driver and main bodyguard, was always there, standing by the door, his eyes missing nothing. The man who came to fix the IT every other day was built like a linebacker and had a distinct bulge under his left armpit. The silence was the weirdest part. The phones barely rang. The office was hushed, but it thrummed with a nervous, coiled energy. They were always talking in code. "The South Boston property is resisting the new lease terms," his lieutenant, a man named Marco, would say, and Dante would reply, "Then we must be more persuasive. Send a strong message about compliance." It wasn't real estate. I knew it. But I took the paychecks. I paid my new exorbitant rent. I started paying back the loan. I told myself I was just an employee. I was just buying my time, buying my freedom. One night, I was packing up my desk. It was late, almost 8. Dante was still at his desk, staring at the city lights. "Emily," he said, not turning around. "I have a dinner engagement. I'd like you to join me." I froze. A date?" He turned, and a small, almost undetectable smile touched his lips. "No, a business dinner with my senior team. You are my private assistant. Your presence will be helpful for appearances. I'm not dressed for... You look fine." The dinner was at a small, impossibly exclusive Italian restaurant in the North End. There was no sign on the door. Dante just knocked, and the door was opened by a man who looked like he'd broken noses for a living. "Dante." "Good to see you," the man grunted, clapping Dante on the shoulder. We were led to a private room in the back. Russo and Marco were already there, along with 2 other men who looked just as hard. They all stood when Dante entered. They all stared at me. "This is Emily Ruiz," Dante said simply, pulling out a chair for me. "She'll be taking notes." I sat, my heart hammering. I was in a room with... I didn't even want to think about it, but the dinner was civilized. Dante treated me with an almost formal respect. He made sure my wine glass was full. He asked my opinion on the food. He included me. And because he respected me, they respected me. They nodded at me. They called me Miss Ruiz. They were polite. We were just finishing dessert when it happened. Russo's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went white. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Dante," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Now, we have to go. They're here." Who? Dante was on his feet, his calm evaporating, replaced by a cold, lethal focus. "The Albanians. They knew we were here. It's a setup." Dante didn't hesitate. He grabbed my arm. "Emily, with me. Stay behind me. Do not stop. Do not speak." He pulled me from the room, through the kitchen, which was suddenly empty. Russo and Marco were on either side of us, their hands inside their jackets. We burst out a side door into a dark, narrow alley. The black SUV was there, idling. "Get her in!" Dante yelled, shoving me toward the back door. Russo yanked it open. I was halfway inside when the sound ripped through the night. It wasn't like in movies. It was a loud, cracking, popping sound, like a string of firecrackers, but 100 times louder. Pop, 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 pop! The side window of the SUV, right where my head had been a second before, exploded into a spiderweb of fractured glass. I screamed, "Down!" Dante roared, and he threw himself on top of me, his body covering mine, slamming me onto the floor of the SUV. He was impossibly heavy, crushing the air from my lungs. I felt the car lurch as Russo floored it. More pops, and the sound of metal tearing. I was screaming, or I thought I was. I couldn't hear anything but the ringing in my ears and Dante's harsh breathing above me. The car swerved violently, throwing us against the door. He didn't move. His body was a solid shield, his arm clamped around the back of my head, pressing my face into the cheap carpet, which smelled like leather and gunpowder. Then, as quickly as it started, it was over. The car was accelerating, the sounds of the city returning, muffled. Dante didn't move for a full minute. I was shaking so hard I couldn't breathe. "Dante!" Russo yelled from the front. "Are you hit?" "No." Dante's voice rumbled, right against my ear. "The girl? I'm okay," I gasped. He pushed himself off me, his movements controlled. He sat on the seat, pulling me up with him. In the flashing streetlights, I could see his face. It was a mask of cold fury. "They saw you," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "They saw you with me. They know who you are." He looked at me, and his eyes were not the eyes of the man in the office. They were the eyes of the man from the diner, the killer. "I will never let you be caught in my world again." He barked an address to Russo. It wasn't my address. He took me to his home. It wasn't an apartment. It was a penthouse that took up the entire top floor of a different, unmarked building. It was a fortress, all glass and steel and cold, empty spaces. I was still shaking. Russo handed me a glass of water, and I dropped it. It shattered on the marble floor. "I quit," I said, my voice trembling. I can't do this. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the job. I want out." "Out?" Dante said, stalking over to a massive window that overlooked the entire city. "You think out is an option now? You were just in a car that was shot at by the Albanian mob. They saw you. They know you are with me. What do you think quitting means to them? Do you think they care that you're just a part-time assistant?" He turned to face me, his eyes blazing. "Leaving me now, Emily, is the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. You are safer in this penthouse than you will ever be. Anywhere else, you're safest close to me. So I'm a prisoner?" I cried. "You're protected," he roared, and the sound of his voice, that raw, unrestrained power, finally broke me. I collapsed onto a massive black leather sofa. The adrenaline was gone, and all that was left was the cold, shaking terror. I hadn't just been shot at, I had been trapped. By Brian's cruelty, by my own poverty, and now, by this man's protection. I put my face in my hands, and I sobbed. I cried for my lost job, for my lost life, for the 4 years I'd wasted. I cried for my own stupid, hopeful heart. I've always been abandoned, I choked out, the words tearing out of me. My dad, he was a gambler. He'd be gone for weeks. He'd come back, promise us the world, and then gone again. My mom, she was there, but she just checked out. She was a ghost. And then Brian, I was rambling, spilling all the broken pieces of my life onto his priceless marble floor. He made me feel safe. And then he did the same thing. Everyone leaves me. And now I'm trapped here with you, and I'm gonna die because of you. The room was silent, save for my own ragged breathing. I felt the couch cushion dip. I looked up. Dante was sitting beside me, not close, just there. He was quiet for a long time. His face was no longer hard. It was something else, something pained. My wife died, he said, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I stopped crying, my breath catching. It was a long time ago, 18 years. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the city, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. Her name was Sophia. She died giving birth to our son, the boy. He didn't make it, either. They were both gone. He swallowed, and I saw his throat work. I have not allowed myself to feel anything for another woman since that day. I built this empire, so I would never have to feel anything. It is armor. It is a fortress. It is empty, but it is safe. He turned his head, and his dark eyes met mine. Until you, he whispered. Until I saw you at that restaurant, you didn't break. You just endured, and I felt something. I wanted to protect that. I wanted to keep that strength safe. He lifted a hand, his movements hesitant, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed. His fingers were calloused. He brushed the hair back from my wet face. I'm so sorry I brought this to your door. Emily, he said, his voice raw. I just stared at him. This was the man who had shot up my world, and he was the first person who had looked at me, really looked at me, in years. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so tired of being alone. I leaned into his touch, just an inch. It was all the invitation he needed. He leaned in, slowly. He was giving me time to pull away. I couldn't. His lips touched mine. It wasn't a spark. It was an avalanche. It was slow, intense, and flooded with an emotional depth that stole my breath. It was not a rushed, desperate thing. It was reverent. His mouth was firm, hesitant, but full of a fire that had been banked for almost 20 years. His other hand came up, cupping my jaw, his thumb grazing my cheekbone. It was a kiss of shared pain, of profound loneliness. It was the most dangerous, terrifying, and unnecessary thing I had ever felt. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine. Neither of us said a word. We didn't know what to say. The kiss had changed everything, and it had solved nothing. Exhaustion, emotional and physical, pulled me under. I felt his arms lift me. I was too tired to protest. I woke up in the dark, disoriented. I was in a bed, a massive, impossibly comfortable bed. The sheets smelled like him, like expensive soap and something metallic and cold. I was still in my clothes from the restaurant. The door was open a crack. I could see him, a silhouette, standing by the massive window in the living room, looking out at the city, a king in his cold glass castle. I was in his bed. He had put me here, and he had left me alone. A new, cold dread washed over me. Was this just another form of control? Was I just a pawn? A prized possession he'd saved? Something to keep in his fortress? I didn't belong here. I was just a waitress, a girl with a broken heart, caught in a war I didn't understand. I slipped out of the bed. I needed to go home. I needed to be in my own space. I found my purse by the front door. I slipped on my shoes. He didn't turn as I opened the heavy door. Russo is downstairs, he said, his voice quiet. He will take you wherever you need to go. Thank you. I left, not looking back. Russo drove me, in a new, identical black SUV, back to my apartment. The sun was just beginning to tint the sky a sickly gray. I felt like I was walking in a dream. I climbed the stairs to my unit, my keys shaking in my hand. Before I could put it in the lock, The door was yanked open from the inside. Brian stood there. He was unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, and he reeked of stale whiskey. "Where the hell have you been?" he slurred, his face a mask of jealous rage. "Brian, what? How did you get in?" "I still have a key, you idiot," he spat. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep, right where Dante had held me. "You've been out all night. Who is he? Who's the guy in the suit I've seen you with? You think you're better than me now? You think you can just move on that fast?" He shoved me against the wall of the hallway. "You're nothing. Emily, you're my nothing." Brian's accusation hung in the stale hallway air, thick with the smell of his whiskey-soaked breath. My nothing. For a second, the old Emily, the one from the copper table, wanted to shrink, to apologize, to make herself small and just disappear. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had been in a car as bullets shattered the windows. I had been kissed by a man who spoke of death and loyalty in the same breath. This drunken, pathetic boy in front of me. He was just loud. "Get out, Brian," I said, my voice low and cold. I was surprised by the steadiness in it. "What?" He seemed genuinely shocked, as if I'd just spoken in a different language. "Get out of my apartment. You can't talk to me like that," he slurred, grabbing for my arm again. "I made you. You're only with this new guy because he saw you with me. Let go of me." I shoved him, hard. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with drunken fury. "You're a whore. Emily, you're just a mafia whore." He raised his hand, and this time I knew he meant to hit me. I flinched, bracing for the impact, a sick, familiar dread rising in my throat. It never came. "Is there a problem here? Miss Ruiz?" The voice was deep, calm, and cut through Brian's drunken rage like a razor. We both froze. At the end of the dark hallway, near the stairs, stood Russo. He wasn't in his driver's uniform. He was in a simple dark jacket, but he was unmistakable. He was a block of granite, and his eyes were fixed on Brian's hand, the one still raised in the air. Brian's face went from puce to a sickly, mottled white. He was drunk, but he wasn't stupid. He could smell the danger. It was a different species of power from his, a kind that didn't bother with stock portfolios. Who the hell are you?" Brian stammered, his hand dropping. "I'm a friend of Miss Ruiz," Russo said, taking one slow, deliberate step forward. The hallway lights glinted off something on his belt. "She asked you to leave. I suggest you do it." Brian looked at me, then at Russo, then back at me. His jealous rage was instantly snuffed out, replaced by a pathetic, cowering fear. "Fine," he spat, his voice shaking. "Fine, you can have the trash." He fumbled in his pocket, pulled out his copy of my key, and threw it on the grimy hallway floor. It landed with a small, tinny clatter. "You'll regret this. Emily, you'll come crawling back." He practically ran down the stairs, tripping over his own feet. I was left in the hallway, my entire body shaking with a delayed reaction. Russo stood there, his face impassive. "Are you all right, Miss Ruiz?" I just nodded, unable to speak. I bent down, my knees weak, and picked up the key. He won't be back." Russo said it wasn't a reassurance. It was a statement of fact. He waited until I had fumbled with the lock and gotten inside my apartment. Then I heard his heavy footsteps retreat. I slid the deadbolt and leaned against the door, my heart hammering. I was safe. Brian was gone, but I wasn't. I was a prisoner. Russo hadn't been there by chance. Dante had a man watching my building, watching me. The kiss in his penthouse. It wasn't a moment of connection. It was a brand. He was marking his property. I grabbed my phone, my fingers clumsy with rage and fear. I called him. He answered on the first ring. He was here. I said, no preamble. "Brian, he was in my apartment." "I know." Dante's voice was calm, a deep rumble. "Are you hurt? Your man, Russo, he was here. You're having me watched, like a thing." There was a pause. "I'm having you protected. Emily, there is a difference." "No," I shouted, and I was horrified to hear my voice crack. "There isn't. Not in your world. I can't live like this. I can't be this person. The one who has men waiting in hallways. I can't. Emily? I mean it, Dante. I quit. The job. This Whatever this is, I'm out. I'll pay you back for the loan, every cent, even if I have to work at the diner for the rest of my life. Just stop. Please. No more men, no more protection. I want my life back. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, cold. I will respect your wishes, he said finally. His voice was flat, all the warmth from the penthouse gone. But the world is what it is. Be careful, Emily. He hung up. I sank to the floor, my phone clutched in my hand. I had done it. I was free. I was cut off. I had never felt so alone. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. I tried to get my dinner shifts back, but Sal just shook his head, his eyes full of pity. The new owners, they're strict. Kid, my hands are tied. They won't even let me hire you back for lunch. Of course they wouldn't. Dante's influence, even in retreat, was a shadow I couldn't escape. I was blacklisted. I spent my days looking for jobs online, waitress, receptionist, anything. But my address, the one in the building now owned by that aggressive holding company, seemed to be a red flag. I got no callbacks. The loan payment was due in 10 days. My savings were gone. I was trapped, and he kept his word. The black cars were gone. The feeling of being watched evaporated. The silence was absolute. I missed it. I hated myself for it. But the fear of being truly alone, unprotected, was a gnawing, physical ache. Then, the rumors started. It began on social media, a few whispers on local gossip forums. Brian, humiliated and furious, had been talking. He was painting a picture of himself as the victim. Sarah called me, her voice tight with anger. Em, have you seen this? It's disgusting. Seen what? I was logged into a job portal, my eyes gritty from staring at the screen. It's Brian. He's telling everyone, that you were the one who was cheating, that he caught you, that you've been sleeping your way up with some rich, dangerous investor. My stomach dropped. What? And Kendra. Oh, God, Em, you have to see this. My hands were shaking as I opened my Instagram app, an app I hadn't checked in weeks. Kendra's profile was the first thing that popped up. She had posted a new video, tagged from some tropical resort. It already had 3 million views. She was in a tiny, glittering bikini, sipping a colorful drink by an infinity pool. Brian was nowhere to be seen. Hey, guys, she chirped, her voice a sickly sweet syrup. So, a lot of you have been asking about my amazing new man, Brian, and, well, the drama with his crazy ex. She took a delicate sip, pouting for the camera. I just want to clear the air, because I am all about positivity and light. Some girls, they just can't stand to see a woman win, you know? They just see what you have, and they want it. They'll do anything to get it. They'll sleep their way to the top, find some rich old man to be their, protector. She made air quotes, her long pink nails flashing. But here's the tea. Honey, you can buy the nice clothes. You can even get into the penthouse. But you can't buy class. Class is forever. Stay gold, ladies. She blew a kiss at the camera. The comment section was a sewer. Gold digger, I knew she was trash. Brian is so much better off. Someone find this psycho ex and cancel her. My name wasn't mentioned. It didn't have to be. Everyone from the copper table. All of Brian's friends. Everyone, and they knew. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was the copper table all over again. But this time, it wasn't one restaurant. It was the whole world. I was being humiliated, and I couldn't even defend myself. I threw my phone against the wall. It hit the plaster with a sickening crack and slid to the floor, the screen dark. I didn't care. I just sank to my knees. The public shame, a physical weight. 2 days passed. I didn't leave my apartment. I unplugged my router. I was a ghost in my own life, waiting for the eviction notice. My phone, which I'd pieced back together, buzzed. A text from Sarah, "Turn on the news, now." I fumbled for my small TV's remote. I hit the local news channel. A bright, overly perky entertainment reporter was on screen. And in the biggest influencer implosion we've seen this year, streaming star Kendra Scott, known as Kendra Kisses, has been completely deplatformed overnight. My heart stopped. Scott, who was just yesterday posting from a luxury resort, has had all social media accounts suspended for severe violations of terms of service. But it doesn't stop there. A massive data leak, posted anonymously last night, shows what appears to be widespread tax evasion, wire fraud, and evidence that Scott was running a pay-for-play scam on her followers, promoting products she knew to be defective. They showed a screenshot of a spreadsheet. It was dense, clinical. Her major brand sponsors, including Radiant Beauty and Lux Life Athletics, have all dropped her, citing a moral turpitude clause in their contracts. Her upcoming makeup line has been canceled. As of this morning, Scott is reportedly under federal investigation. The reporter leaned in, her voice hushed. It is a complete and total career assassination. Back to you, Tom. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. It wasn't an attack. It was a dissection, a surgical, silent removal. He hadn't sent men. He hadn't made a threat. He had just pulled the plug. He'd erased her from the world as easily as I'd delete a file. My phone rang. The number was blocked, but I knew who it was. I answered, my hand trembling. "Hello, Emily." His voice. I couldn't speak. She tried to hurt you," he said. His voice was not triumphant, it was flat. "I told you I don't like bullies. You ruined her," I whispered. "She made her choices. I simply illuminated them." A pause. "This is why I wanted you to stay away. This is the world that follows me." I swallowed, my mind a war of conflicting emotions. I was horrified. The sheer effortless power of it terrified me. He could end someone, just end them. But a dark, secret, shameful part of me. It felt warm, protected. Brian had torn me down in public. Kendra had tried to finish the job. And Dante, he had responded with the force of a tectonic plate. No one, not my father, not my mother, not Brian, no one had ever stood up for me. Not like this. "I'm leaving the city for a few days," he said, pulling me from my thoughts. "I'm going upstate, to my vineyard." "A vineyard?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "It's quiet. It's safe. The men who shot at us, they are still looking. And after what just happened to that girl, they will be looking for you. They will assume you are my weakness. They are not wrong." I squeezed my eyes shut. He was right. "I want you to come with me," he said. My pride, what was left of it, screamed no. To go with him now. It was admitting defeat. It was accepting his protection. It was becoming what Kendra had accused me of being. But I was also so scared, and I wanted to see him. I hated myself for it. I hated the part of me that felt safer when his dark shadow was looming. Just for a few days," I whispered. To get out of the city, to clear my head." "Russo will pick you up in 1 hour," he said, and hung up. The vineyard was 4 hours north, nestled in rolling hills that were painted with the burnt orange and deep red of late autumn. The house was not a modern fortress like his penthouse. It was an old, beautiful 2-story stone farmhouse covered in ivy, with a wide wraparound porch. It was peaceful. It felt real. Dante was waiting on the porch. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing dark jeans, boots, and a heavy charcoal gray wool sweater. He looked younger. He looked like a man, not a myth. "You came," he said. He didn't smile, but the hard lines around his eyes seemed to soften. "You said it was safe," I said, clutching my small overnight bag. He showed me to a room on the 2nd floor. It was beautiful, with a large, carved wooden bed and a fireplace. The windows overlooked the dormant vines, stretching for miles. "This is the best room," he said, placing my bag on the floor. "The warmest. Thank you." We stood there, awkward. The kiss, the firefight, the rumors. It all hung in the air between us. That night. We sat by the massive stone fireplace in the living room. The house was quiet. Russo and his men were quartered in a guest house 100 yards away. We were, for the first time, truly alone. Dante poured 2 glasses of deep red wine. From the grapes out there," he said, handing me one. I took a sip. It was strong, and it warmed me from the inside out. "Tell me," I said, my voice quiet. "The truth. I deserve that." He looked into the fire, swirling the wine in his glass. "The truth," he repeated. He told me about his father, coming from Sicily, building an import business that the other families hadn't respected. He told me about his father's murder. He told me about being 22 years old with a choice: run and let them take everything, or fight back. "I fought back," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I took what was ours. And I built it into something no one could ever take. It's not a pretty world, Emily. It runs on loyalty. My men, their families are taken care of, forever. Their children's college is paid. Their wives are safe. In return, they give me their lives. It's a simple, brutal contract. And the price?" I whispered. He looked at me, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. "Peace. It costs you peace. You can never relax. You can never trust. It costs you your soul, I think, but it is my world. It is the only one I have." I just nodded, taking it in. He wasn't apologizing. He was explaining. He was treating me like an equal. Later, we were in the large, rustic kitchen. We were cooking. It was the most surreal and normal thing I had ever done. He was chopping onions, his large, calloused hands surprisingly precise. I was stirring a sauce. It felt domestic. We moved around each other, bumping elbows, murmuring, "Excuse me." His hand brushed mine as we both reached for the salt. The contact was electric. It was more intimate than the kiss. After dinner, he did something that completely disarmed me. He walked over to an old, antique record player. He put on a vinyl record. The faint crackle filled the room. And then, Frank Sinatra's voice. He turned to me. He didn't say a word. He just held out his hand. My heart did a stupid, foolish flutter. I put my hand in his. He pulled me close. His hand settled on the small of my back, warm and firm. My other hand rested on his shoulder, on the thick wool of his sweater. We danced, slowly, swaying to the music in the warm light of the fire. I was dancing with Dante Moretti, the man who had ended a woman's career, the man who had been shot at, the man who had saved me. My head felt heavy. I let it rest on his chest. I could hear his heart, a strong, steady, slow beat. It was the calmest sound I had ever heard. "I feel safe," I whispered, and I was horrified that it was the truth. His arms tightened around me. He kissed the top of my hair. "You are safe here, anima mia." My soul. The record ended, the needle hissing faintly. We didn't stop moving. We just stood there, holding each other. "Dante," I said, my voice muffled, Why did you never, after your wife? 18 years it's a lifetime." He pulled back, just enough to look down at me. His face was open. The armor was gone. The fortress was breached. "Because I was dead," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't place. "My heart was buried with Sophia. I was just an engine. I ran the business. I protected my men. I existed. But I was not alive." He lifted a hand, his thumb grazing my cheekbone, and, "Because no one ever made me feel like you do." He kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, pained kiss from the penthouse. This one was knowing. It was slow and deep and full of a profound, patient hunger. It was the kiss of a man who had been starving for a lifetime. He kissed my forehead, my eyelids, my cheekbones, his lips tracing a path that made my skin burn. "Emily." He breathed my name like a prayer, like a curse. "Are you sure? This changes everything. There is no going back from this. Not for me, not for you." "I know," I whispered. I was so tired of being alone, so tired of being cold. I'm not afraid of you." He lifted me into his arms as if I weighed nothing. I wrapped my arms around his neck. He carried me. Not to my room, to his. It was a mending. I had been broken by Brian, by a world that saw me as disposable. He had been broken by grief, encased in ice for almost 2 decades. It wasn't a desperate, clumsy clash of bodies. It was slow, deliberate. His hands, those calloused, dangerous hands, were so gentle. He touched me as if I were made of glass, as if he was memorizing me. He wasn't taking, he was worshipping. And in his arms, in that quiet, safe house, wrapped in the scent of him, I wasn't a waitress, I wasn't a victim, I wasn't a gold digger, I was his. And for the first time in my entire life, I was completely, terrifyingly wanted. We returned to the city 2 days later. The world was gray and loud and hostile. The peace of the vineyard felt like a dream. We were in the SUV, parked outside my apartment. The air was thick with unspoken things. "I am changing things," he said, his hand gripping the steering wheel. "It will take time, but I will make this safe for you. I promise." He leaned over and kissed me. A deep, possessive kiss that was nothing like the night at the vineyard. This was a claim. "Lock your door. Russo will be outside all night, in the car. I'll call you in the morning." I nodded, my lips still tingling. I went inside. My apartment felt wrong, small, cheap. It smelled like my old life. I was making coffee, my mind still on the feel of his wool sweater, when my front door exploded. It didn't just open. The lock, the deadbolt, the frame itself, it splintered, wood flying into the room. 2 men stormed in. They were huge. They weren't speaking Italian. They were yelling, harsh, guttural sounds, Albanian. They grabbed me before I could even scream. I fought. I bit the hand that clamped over my mouth, tasting blood and leather. The man roared and backhanded me across the face. The world exploded in white light, and I fell hard against the kitchen counter, my lips splitting. They were dragging me by my arms toward the door. Then, pop, 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 gunshots, loud, in my tiny hallway. The men dropped me. I hit the floor. They spun, pulling their own guns, and started firing back. My hallway was a war zone. I scrambled, crawling, digging my nails into the cheap linoleum, hiding behind the peninsula of my counter. Bullets tore through the drywall above my head. Plaster rained down on me. A man screamed, a wet, choked sound, a heavy thud. Right in my doorway, silence. A terrible, ringing silence. "Miss Ruiz?" It was Russo. His voice was strained. I peered around the counter. One of the men was dead. His body twisted in my doorway. The other was gone. Russo was leaning against the opposite wall, his jacket torn, his arms soaked in blood. Then he was there. Dante. He must have been in a second car. He stormed past the body, his gun still in his hand, his face. It was not human. It was a white-hot, apocalyptic rage. He saw me, huddled on the floor, my hand to my bleeding mouth. He saw Russo, clutching his arm, in 2 strides. He was in front of me. He dropped to his knees, his gun clattering to the floor. He grabbed my face, his hands shaking, his eyes, black and blown wide, scanned me for injuries. "Did they touch you? Did they hurt you?" They hit me," I stammered, tasting my own blood. His eyes closed for a second. A tremor ran through his entire body. "They found me," I whispered, the terror finally catching up. "How did they find me? Dante, you said I was safe. How did they know my address?" Dante's head snapped up. He looked at Russo. Russo, pale and bleeding, looked back at him. A silent, awful understanding passed between them. "Only 3 people knew this address. Emily," Dante said, his voice a low, lethal whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "Me, Russo, and Marco." Marco, his lieutenant, the man from the dinner. Dante stood up. He pulled out his phone. His hands were steady now. "Marco, my penthouse. Now." He hung up and turned back to me, his face carved from ice. "They didn't just find you," he said. "They were given you. Someone in my house. A mole." He looked at the dead man on his floor, then at me. "Get your coat. You're not staying here tonight. You are not leaving my side again." He helped me to my feet, his touch gentle, but his eyes were fixed on the door, on the city beyond. "I will find the man who did this," he whispered, his voice so cold it burned, "and I will tear his world apart." The penthouse was silent, but it was the silence of a held breath, of a bomb before it explodes. Russo was in the kitchen. A medic Dante had called, God knows where he'd found him at 3 a.m, stitching up the bloody gash in his arm. Russo didn't even flinch. He just stared at the marble countertop, his face pale and grim. I was sitting on the black leather sofa, the one I'd cried on what felt like a lifetime ago. A bag of frozen peas was pressed to my split lip, but I couldn't feel the cold. I just felt numb. Dante was not numb. He was a specter of absolute rage. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't pacing. He stood at the window, a phone pressed to his ear, his back to me. His words were low, precise, and spoken entirely in Italian. But I didn't need a translator to understand the language of violence. He was giving orders. He was dispatching death. He clicked off the phone and turned. His eyes found me. He thinks he's smart, he said, his voice a low growl. Marco, he thinks he can sell you to the Albanians. Let them get what they want and step into my place when I'm distracted. He thinks he can use my feelings as leverage. Dante, I whispered, the word hurting my lip. Just let it go. Let me go. It's too much. He walked over to me. He knelt so his eyes were level with mine. The man from the vineyard, the one with the warm hands and sad eyes, was gone. This was the boss. This was the killer. Let it go, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He put his hands on you. He sent men to your home to drag you into the street. He is responsible for the bullet in Russo's arm. And he betrayed me. In my world. Emily, we don't let it go. We end it. He stood. I have to leave. Russo will stay. The doors are locked. Do not go near the windows. No one gets in. Where are you going? I asked, though I already knew. He paused at the door, pulling on a dark jacket. He looked at me, and his face was a mask of cold, hard stone. To deliver justice. He was gone for 7 hours. 7 hours I spent pacing the marble floors of that glass cage high above the city. Russo, stitched and silent, sat on a chair by the main elevator, a new gun resting in his lap. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I could only see the splintered wood of my apartment door, hear the sickening crack when that man had hit me. Just before dawn, the elevator chimed. Dante walked in. He was alone. He looked the same, but different. His suit was gone, replaced by the jeans and dark sweater from the vineyard, as if he'd changed clothes. There was a stillness to him, a terrible, final stillness. He walked past me, past Russo, and into his kitchen. He turned on the tap, the water rushing loudly in the silence. He began to wash his hands, not just rinse. He was scrubbing, up to his elbows. He used the abrasive dish soap, scrubbing his fingernails, his palms, his forearms, again and again. Is it done? Russo asked, his voice hoarse. Dante turned off the tap. He grabbed a dish towel and dried his hands, his movements methodical. Where is Marco? I whispered, my voice trembling. Dante looked at me. His eyes were empty, devoid of light, of anger, of the fire I'd seen. They were just black. Marco, he said, his voice flat, is no longer a problem. And in that moment, I understood. He hadn't just fired him. He hadn't just had him beaten. He had ended him. The same man he'd had dinner with, the man who'd been his lieutenant. I felt the blood drain from my face. I backed away from him, my hand flying to my mouth. Oh, God, you killed him. He didn't deny it. He just watched me, his face unreadable. I protected you. I protected my house. That's not protection, I screamed, the numbness finally shattering, replaced by a visceral, sickening horror. That's murder. You're a murderer. I am what I have to be, he said, his voice still terrifyingly calm. This is the world you're in, Emily. This is the price of what we have. No, I was shaking my head, backing toward the bedroom. No, I can't. The man at the vineyard. The man who danced with me. That's not this. It's the same man. he said, taking a step toward me. No. I fled. I ran into the guest room, the room where I'd woken up after the first kiss, and I slammed the door. I locked it. I stood there, my back pressed against the wood, listening to his footsteps stop outside. He didn't knock. He just stood there. Emily, he said, his voice muffled by the thick wood. He would have come for you again. They all will. This was the only way. Leave me alone! I shrieked. I waited, my breath held, until I heard his footsteps retreat. I stayed in that room all day. I was falling for a man who killed to protect, a man who saw justice as an act he could deliver with his own hands. I thought about my father, a weak man destroyed by men like Dante, and here I was, falling in love with the king of them all. I was becoming one of them, the kind of woman who overlooks the blood, who enjoys the power, who stays quiet. That night, I made my decision. I waited until I was sure he was in his study. The penthouse was silent. I took the small overnight bag I'd brought back from the vineyard. It was all I had left of my old life. I sat at the desk in the guest room. I found a piece of his heavy, cream-colored stationery. My hand was shaking so badly, my handwriting was almost illegible. Dante, I can't do this. I thought I could. I thought I was strong enough to live in your world, but I'm not. Or maybe I'm too strong to. I can't watch you become this person, and I can't become someone else just to stay with you. Don't come for me, please. If you ever cared for me, just let me go. I'm not yours to protect anymore. Emily. I left the note on the pillow. I slipped my shoes on. I crept to the elevator. Russo was gone. Dante must have sent him home. The penthouse was empty. Just him, in his study, and me, slipping away like a thief. I got to the ground floor. I ran. I didn't look back. I ran for blocks, my small bag banging against my leg, until I was just another face in the late-night crowd. I went to the Port Authority bus terminal. It was a sea of lost souls, of people running from something. I fit right in. It was loud, smelled of diesel and despair, and it was the one place I knew he wouldn't look for me. I got in line for a ticket to Philadelphia. It was far enough to be gone, close enough that I could almost pretend I was just visiting. My hands were shaking. I clutched my wallet, my eyes darting around the terminal, expecting to see a man in a dark suit, or worse, one of the Albanians. He's not here. The voice. His voice. Right behind me. I spun around. He was there. Not in a suit. He was still in the dark sweater and jeans. He looked awful. He hadn't slept. His face was pale, his eyes bruised with exhaustion and a desperate, raw pain. How did you... You left your phone, he said, his voice hoarse. At the penthouse. I didn't track it. I knew. Where else would you go? A place to disappear. He looked at the sign above my head. Philadelphia. He said it like a curse. Don't do this, Emily, he begged, and the sound of him begging, the most powerful man I'd ever known, shattered my resolve. Please, don't leave me. I have to, I whispered, tears welling. Don't you see, I was relieved you killed him. Dante. For a second, I was glad. That's what your world is doing to me. I'm becoming like you. No, he said, grabbing my hands. His were cold. You make me better. I was dead for 18 years. You woke me up. Don't leave me in the dark again. I can change. I'm transitioning the business. I'm making it clean. For you, it takes time. I don't have time, I cried, pulling my hands away. Look at me. I'm terrified. I'm looking over my shoulder. I'm running. This isn't a life. The line moved. I was next. Emily, he said, his voice breaking. Please, I can't. I sobbed. I turned to the counter. 1 ticket to Philadelphia. Please. I paid. The woman handed me the ticket. I turned back. Dante was still standing there. He wasn't angry. He just looked broken. He had all the power in the world, and he couldn't stop one woman from walking away from him. He stepped back. He actually stepped back, clearing my path to the gate. I will always protect you. Anima mia, he whispered, even if it's from myself. But they won't stop. Emily, please be safe. Call me. If you ever, just call. He respected my decision. He let me go. I walked toward the gate, my ticket in my hand. I could feel his eyes on my back. I got to the door. I looked at the bus, idling, its fumes choking the air. I looked back at him, a solitary, powerful, broken figure in the middle of the terminal. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get on the bus, but I couldn't go back to him either. I turned and I ran. I ran out a different exit, back into the city streets. I didn't go back to my apartment. I went to the only other place I could. I called Sarah, my one true friend. I showed up on her doorstep at 2 a.m, my face a mess of tears, my lips swollen. I told her, not everything. I told her I'd gotten involved with a powerful man, that I was in trouble, that my ex was crazy, and that I had nowhere else to go. She didn't ask questions. She just opened the door, pulled me into a hug, and let me cry on her shoulder. You can stay as long as you need, Em, she said. He'll never find you here. I stayed on her couch for 3 days. It was normal. We watched bad television. We ordered pizza. I helped her fold laundry. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look out the window. For 3 days, I was just Emily Ruiz, crashing at her friend's place. On the 4th day, Sarah went to work. I was alone in her apartment. I was finally starting to breathe. I was making a pot of coffee, thinking, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could just start over. The lock on Sarah's door wasn't just jimmied. It was kicked in. The sound of the wood splitting was the same sound I'd heard in my own apartment. I didn't even scream. I just reacted. I grabbed my phone, ran into her small bathroom, and locked the door. I heard 2 men. They weren't speaking Italian. They weren't speaking Albanian. They were speaking English, American accents. Hired muscle. She's got to be here, one said. Boss said the friend's place. Just grab the laptop, the jewelry. Make it look like a break-in. He wants her. They were ransacking the place. I heard glass shatter. I was hiding in the bathtub, behind the shower curtain, my hand over my mouth to muffle my breathing. I was dialing, not 911. I was dialing him. Before I could hit send, I heard a key in the lock. Emily? Sarah's voice. She'd forgotten her work ID. Oh, crap, one of the men said. Who are you? I heard Sarah scream. Get out of my apartment. I heard a thud, a sickening, wet crack, and then silence. Just silence. The men panicked. Let's go, cops will be here. I heard them run out, their heavy boots pounding on the stairs. I waited, my entire body paralyzed. 1 minute, 2, I crept out of the bathroom. Sarah was on the floor, by the door. Her purse was spilled open, its contents scattered. She was lying in a wrong angle. Her arm was clearly broken. There was a gash on her forehead, and her eyes were closed. Sarah! I screamed, scrambling to her side. Oh, God, Sarah! I called 911, my voice a hysterical shriek, and as soon as I hung up, I called him. He answered before the first ring finished. Sarah, I sobbed, the words tumbling out. They came here. They were looking for me. She came home. They hurt her. She's not moving? Oh, God, Dante, it's my fault. It's all my fault. He didn't say a word. He just hung up. The ambulance was there in 5 minutes, and somehow he was there in 6. His black SUV screeched to a halt, and he was out of it before the engine was off. He stormed into the building, past the gathering neighbors. He saw me, covered in Sarah's blood, trying to talk to the paramedics. He saw Sarah being loaded onto the gurney. He came over to me, and the look on his face. It was a cold, quiet, self-loathing. He didn't touch me. This, he said, his voice a low, a guttural rasp, is what happens when I try to let you go. This is my fault. The police were there, but he just waved them off. He spoke to the lead officer, and the man nodded. The officer just nodded and told his men to secure the scene. Dante was in charge, at the hospital. They told us Sarah was stable, A severe concussion, a broken ulna, and 3 broken ribs, but she would live. I collapsed into a plastic waiting room chair, my head in my hands. I had done this. My stupid pride, my need to be independent. I had almost gotten my best friend killed. Dante sat next to me. He didn't say anything, he just sat. "They will never stop," he said, after an hour of silence. "You were right to leave me, but you can't. Not now. They know who you are. The Albanians, my rivals, every punk who wants to make a name for himself. You are the target. And as long as you are just Emily Ruiz, you are a soft target." He looked at me, his eyes dead. "I realized something when you left. They won't stop using you until I make a public declaration, until I show them that you are not a weakness, that you are a part of me, that to touch you is to touch me." "What? What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means," he said, standing up, "you can't be independent. Not yet. It means your survival depends on me." He offered me his hand. "Come with me. I have a place, a real one, a safe house. You will stay there. You will not leave. You will not argue. You will just be safe. Until I end this. All of it." I looked at his hand, the hand that had held me, the hand that had killed Marco. I put my hand in his. I had no other choice. My survival, Sarah's survival. It all depended on me giving in. The safe house was a brownstone in Brooklyn. It looked normal, but the door was reinforced steel. The windows were an inch thick. The inside was comfortable. But it was a prison. Russo and 2 other men were outside, front and back. We were alone, for days. The first 2 days, we barely spoke. I was mourning my life, my friend, my freedom. He was planning. He was on the phone in a locked study for hours, but the silence, it was too much. On the 3rd night, I couldn't stand it. I went into the kitchen, I opened the fridge. It was fully stocked. I just started cooking. I chopped vegetables, I made pasta, just to do something normal. He came out of the study. Drawn by the smell, he just watched me. I made too much, I said, my voice quiet. He sat at the kitchen island. I put a plate in front of him. We ate in silence. "It's good," he said. We started talking. Not about the men, not about the blood. We talked about nothing, about the vineyard, about my job at the diner. He told me about his mother. I told him about my father. The passion, the desperate, hungry fire from the vineyard. It was gone. It had burned out. In its place was something else, something quieter, deeper trust. We slept in the same bed. It was a fortress, but he didn't touch me. He just lay on his back, on top of the covers, a guardian. He was letting me heal. He was earning me back, not with promises, but with presence. On the 5th night, I woke up, screaming. The dream was always the same. The splintering door, Sarah's face, the blood. He was there. In an instant, pulling me against his chest. "You're safe," he murmured, his arms clamping around me. "I am here. You're safe." I was sobbing, clinging to his shirt. "I can't live like this. Dante, I'm so scared all the time." He held me until the shaking stopped. He pushed the hair back from my damp face. He didn't kiss my lips. He kissed my forehead, a long, chaste, burning kiss that was more intimate than anything we had ever shared. "You're not just a part of my life anymore," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "You are my life." I looked up at him, and I loved him. Not the idea of him, not the savior, not the killer. I loved him, the whole, broken, dangerous, protective man. "I love you," I whispered, and I knew it was true. "But I won't live in a cage. Dante, I won't live in hiding forever. This isn't a life. I won't do it." A hard, determined light entered his eyes. He looked resolved. "You won't have to," he said. "I have a solution. I've been arranging it." "What? What solution?" "It's the only way. to end this, to make you untouchable, to declare to the whole world who you are. He kept it to himself. Just trust me. For a little while longer. A week passed. A strange, quiet, domestic week. We cooked together, we talked, we healed. The fear began to recede. Then, one evening, he came into the living room. He was holding a long, black garment bag. "It's time," he said. "Time for what?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "I need you to dress up," he said, his face serious. "We're going to a public event." I stood up. "What? Are you crazy? Dante, it's not safe. The Albanians, your rivals." "It is the only way to make it safe," he said, his eyes burning with an intensity that silenced me. "It's time to stop hiding. It's time to show them, Emily. It's time to show everyone that you are mine." He unzipped the bag. Inside was the most beautiful dress I had ever seen. The dress was an armor of deep emerald velvet. It was heavy, fitting my body in a way that felt both elegant and severe. It had long sleeves, a modest neckline, but a slit up the side that spoke of a confidence I didn't possess. Dante had left it for me, along with a pair of simple, dangerously high black heels. A public event, he had said. My stomach had been a knot of ice ever since. Is this the solution?" I asked, standing in the living room of the safe house, feeling like a child playing dress-up. He was in a perfectly tailored black suit, his hair brushed back, the silver at his temples catching the light. He looked regal. He looked like the man who had washed his hands of murder, and the man who had held me while I cried. The contradiction of him was a constant, sharp ache in my chest. "It is the beginning of the solution," he said, his voice quiet. He walked over, his eyes tracing the velvet. He didn't touch me. "Tonight, we are not hiding. We are a fact. You are a fact. We are going to show them you are not a secret. You are not a weakness to be exploited. You are the future." "Dante, I'm scared." He finally let his hand rest on my shoulder. His thumb brushed my collarbone. "I know, so am I, but not of them. I am scared of what this life demands, but I will not let it have you." "Where are we going?" "Someplace." That needs a new memory. The drive was unlike any before. We were not in one SUV, we were in a convoy, a black SUV in front of us. One behind, Russo was in the passenger seat of our car. The driver was a man I didn't know. The windows were so dark I couldn't see out, but I knew the city was rushing by. I felt like a prisoner being transferred, or a queen being paraded. I wasn't sure which. The car slowed, turning a sharp corner. "We're here," Dante said, his hand finding mine in the darkness. His palm was warm and dry. The driver opened the door. Russo was already out, scanning the street. The man from the car behind us was standing by our door. It was a fortress of men. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, and my blood froze. The air, the smell of the street, the glowing amber light from the sign, the copper table. I stopped breathing. "Dante, no." I tried to pull my hand back, a visceral, primal urge to flee. This was the scene of my execution. This was my graveyard. "Yes," he said, his voice firm, his grip tightening on my hand, not painfully, but unbreakably. "Look at me. Emily." I forced my eyes from the glowing sign to his face. "You were humiliated here," he said, his voice low, "for me alone. You were made small, tonight. You are the only person in that room who matters. This place does not own your past, and I will not let it own our future. Walk with me." He put his hand on the small of my back. It was not a request, it was a statement. He propelled me forward, a wall of strength and purpose. The heavy oak doors opened. The hostess, a new girl I didn't recognize, looked up. Her eyes went wide. "Mr. Moretti, your table is ready." She was terrified of him. The entire restaurant was full. It was louder than I remembered, buzzing with the high-pitched laughter and deep-voiced boasting of the city's elite. Politicians I recognized from the news, real estate moguls, old money families. This wasn't just a restaurant tonight. It was a summit, and as we walked through the center of the room, following the hostess. The sound died. It fell away, table by table as we passed. A wave of silence followed us. The clinking of forks stopped. Conversations were cut off mid-sentence. I felt their eyes, hundreds of them. I was the woman in the emerald dress, on the arm of Dante Moretti. I held my head high, my hand gripping his, my knuckles white. I focused on a point on the far wall. They seated us at the best table in the house. Not the corner booth where Dante had watched me break. Not the center table where Brian had discarded me. It was a raised booth, overlooking the entire room, a throne. "Dante," I whispered, sliding onto the velvet bench. "Everyone is staring." "Let them," he said, taking his seat. He signaled a waiter. "A bottle of the 98 Sassicaia." "Of course. Mr. Moretti." The waiter fled. Dante turned to me. He was, for the first time all night, completely relaxed. He was in his element. This was his world. He wasn't hiding in shadows. He was the shadow. "You are beautiful tonight, Emily," he said. "I feel like an exhibit." "You are," he said, not unkindly. "You are my exhibit, and I am yours." I let my eyes scan the room, and I saw them. In the center of the room, at the exact same table where my life had fallen apart, sat Brian. He was with a group of loud, slick-looking men in cheap suits, and across from him, looking awful, was Kendra. Her fall had been as swift as Dante had promised. The data leak had been brutal. The federal investigation was ongoing. She was here tonight, not as a prized influencer, but as Brian's date. The man who had latched onto her for her fame, was now stuck with her in her disgrace. Her hair was a brittle, brassy blonde, her face was thin, her makeup harsh, her smile a desperate grimace. She was laughing too loudly at something one of the men said. She looked up, and her eyes met mine. Her smile didn't just falter, it collapsed. She saw me. She saw the dress. She saw the raised table. She saw the man sitting across from me, the man who commanded the entire room's attention without saying a word. She knew. In that instant, she knew exactly who he was, and she knew exactly who had destroyed her. Her face went the color of ash. She nudged Brian. He looked up, annoyed. "What?" And he saw me, Brian's face. It was a masterpiece of disbelief. He stared. His jaw went slack. He looked from me to Dante, and a dawning, sickening terror filled his eyes. He had called me a mafia whore, and I had, it seemed, become one, the most powerful one in the city. I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted to feel something. But I just felt tired. I looked away from him, back to Dante. "It doesn't matter," Dante said, seeing the look on my face. "They don't matter." The dinner proceeded. The wine was poured. Food arrived, though I couldn't taste it. Dante spoke quietly to me, about the vineyard, about the plans he had for the brownstone, about a trip to Italy he wanted to take. He was building a life, right here, in front of everyone. I could feel Brian stare on me the entire time. It was a hot, hateful, and terrified pinprick on my skin. Then, as the dessert plates were cleared, Dante did something that made my heart stop. He stood up. The effect was instantaneous. The restaurant, which had slowly returned to its dull roar, went utterly silent. Not a whisper. Not a clink of glass. He didn't tap a fork. He didn't clear his throat. He just stood, and he waited. He looked. Not at the room. He looked at me. Then he walked from his side of the table, down the single step, and stood next to me. I stared up at him, my heart hammering. "Dante, what are you doing?" He didn't answer. He simply reached for my hand. He held it, and he turned to face the room. He faced the politicians, the old money, and he faced the table in the center, where Brian and Kendra sat, frozen, and then, in front of the entire, silent, watching city, Dante Moretti got down on one knee. A woman gasped. It was the only sound. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled. It was just his face, his dark, intense eyes, looking up at me with a raw, terrifying vulnerability. Emily Ruiz, he said. His voice was not a whisper. It was clear, and it carried. It was a proclamation. Months ago, in this very room, you were humiliated. You were treated as if you were disposable, as if you were nothing. I could see Brian. He looked like he was going to be sick. That night, Dante continued, his eyes never leaving mine, I saw a strength I had not seen in 20 years. I saw a woman who met her darkest moment with a dignity that a room full of kings could not buy. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, black velvet box. Not blue, black. You were humiliated here. I want this place. I want this city to remember you, not as the woman who was left, but as the woman who rose above it all, as the queen who was finally given her crown. He opened the box. It was not a gaudy diamond. It was an emerald, a massive, rectangular, deep green emerald, the exact color of my dress, flanked by two simple, elegant diamonds. It was old. It was his. You are my life, Emily, he whispered, and this part was just for me. You are my soul. Will you marry me? The world stopped. There was no air. There was no sound. The entire room waited. I looked at his face, the face of the killer, the face of the savior, the face of the man who had danced with me in the kitchen. I saw Brian's shocked, shattered face over Dante's shoulder. I saw Kendra, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. And I started to cry. Not the pained sobs of my old life. These were hot, silent tears of release, of belonging. Yes, I whispered. He didn't hear me. Yes, I said, my voice choked, but louder. Yes, Dante. Yes, he breathed. It was the first time I'd seen him. Exhale, a slow smile, a real one, spread across his face. He took the ring from the box. His hands, those steady, dangerous hands, were shaking. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. It was cold and heavy. It was a promise. He stood up. He pulled me to my feet. And in front of the silent room, he cupped my face in his hands and he kissed me. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not the reverent kiss from the penthouse. It was a kiss of possession. It was deep, and it was hot, and it was final. It was acclaiming. It said, "She is mine. She is untouchable. She is Moretti." And the room, it erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was an explosion of sound. People were standing, clapping, the politicians, the moguls. They were all celebrating, not because of love, because of power. They understood what this meant, a union, an alliance. The king had chosen his queen. We drove home, the high of the night surrounding us like a warm fog. I couldn't stop looking at the ring. It felt impossibly heavy on my hand. We were in the back of the SUV, the lead car in front, the trail car behind. Dante was quiet, but his hand held mine, his thumb stroking my new ring. So that was your solution, I said, my voice still trembling. To make me your wife, to make me untouchable. It was the only solution, he said, his voice a low rumble. To make you family. In my world, Emily. They will kill for weakness, but they will die before they touch family. You are the safest woman in this city tonight. He leaned in and kissed me, softly this time. I love you, he whispered against my lips, and I will spend the rest of my life making this ugly world beautiful for you. I was about to answer. I was about to tell him I loved him, too. That was when the world exploded. It wasn't a pop, pop, pop like before. It was a roar, a deafening, continuous blast of sound, the SUV in front of us. It just vanished in a ball of orange flame. It flipped into the air, a grotesque, burning metal coffin. Our driver screamed and slammed on the brakes. We skidded sideways. Ambush! Russo roared from the front seat. The world turned into a strobe light of muzzle flashes from the rooftops, a high caliber, sustained, shredding. It wasn't a drive-by. It was A military execution. Thwack, 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 the bullets. They weren't just hitting, they were tearing through the armored plating of the car. The window next to my head didn't just crack. It exploded. It vaporized into a million tiny, sharp cubes. Emily! Dante's roar was more animal than human. He didn't push me down. He became the shield. He grabbed me, pulling me from the seat, and hurled his entire body over mine, crushing me against the floor. His arms were steel bands, one clamped around my waist, the other, his hand, was clamped over the back of my head, pushing my face into the carpet. All I could smell was him. All I could feel was the massive, solid weight of his body. The car was being eaten. I could hear the pang, pang, pang of rounds impacting the roof, the floor. I could feel the concussions through his body. He was absorbing them. Russo and the driver were out of the car, returning fire. The sound was a deafening, chaotic war. Dante didn't move. He just covered me. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving against my back, and then I felt it. A tremor, a violent, sudden jerk that went through his entire body. It was not him moving. It was him being moved. A low, wet groan tore from his throat, right against my ear. The shooting. It slowed. I heard tires squealing as the attackers fled. I heard Russo yelling, in Italian. "Dante?" I whispered. My voice was gone. "Dante." He didn't move. He was just a dead weight, a crushing, impossible weight. "Dante, get off me. You're heavy." I pushed. "Dante." He groaned again. He tried to move. He rolled. Just an inch, just enough. I scrambled out from under him. The inside of the car was destroyed. It was dark, but the dashboard lights were flashing. He was slumped on the floor, his back against the seat. "Dante!" I screamed. His eyes were open, but they were glassy. He was pale, so pale. I'm okay, he rasped. "Russo!" I shrieked, yanking the door open. He's hit, help me!" Russo was there, his own face bleeding from shrapnel. "In the car, now, go, go, go." He and the other man, the one from the trail car. They grabbed Dante. They lifted him. "No. Hospital," Dante gasped, his hand clutching his abdomen. "I know, boss," Russo said, his voice tight with panic. "I know. We're going to the doctor." They laid him in the back of the one remaining SUV, the trail car. I scrambled in beside him, cradling his head in my lap. The velvet of my dress was instantly wet and warm. "Go! Go!" Russo yelled at the driver, and the car lurched, peeling out, leaving the burning wreckage behind. I looked down. My hands were covered in his blood. It was so much. It was dark. "Stay with me, Dante," I sobbed, pressing my hands to the wound in his side. "Stay with me. Please, you can't leave me. It's okay," he whispered. His breathing was shallow. He was getting cold. "No, it's not okay. Driver, go faster." We swerved through the city, horn blazing. I was covered in his blood. The emerald ring on my finger was slick with it. He reached up. His hand, it was shaking. He couldn't lift it. I grabbed his hand. It was cold. "Emily," he breathed. His eyes, they were clear now, focused. He was looking right at me, right into me. "Emily, listen to me." His voice was a rasp, a dying ember, but his grip on my hand was strong. "Even if I die tonight," don't say that. "No, listen, even if I die tonight. No, I loved you. With all that I am. I love you, too." I wept, lowering my head to his. "I love you. Don't you dare die. Do you hear me? Don't you dare." The car screeched to a halt in a clean underground garage. A steel door opened. A man in scrubs was waiting with a gurney. Russo and the driver pulled him out. They got him on the gurney. "I love you," I said again, running beside them. He held my hand until the last possible second. They pushed him through a set of steel double doors. The doors swung shut, hissing closed. I was left alone in the hallway, under the sterile, fluorescent lights, covered in the blood of my new fiancé. Time ceases to exist in a hospital. There is no day, no night. There is only the beep of the monitor, the smell of antiseptic, and the drip of the IV. I sat in a hard plastic chair by his bed for 3 weeks. I was still wearing the emerald velvet dress, now stiff and ruined with his dried blood, for the first 24 hours, until Russo, his own arm in a fresh sling, brought me a change of clothes from the safe house. He brought me my toothbrush. He brought me a book I never read. Dante Did Not Die. The man who had stitched up Russo in the underground garage, a disgraced, brilliant surgeon Dante kept on retainer, had worked for 9 hours. 2 bullets had been stopped by the armor of the SUV, the armor of his own body. A third had not. It had slipped under his ribs, a lucky, terrible shot, tearing through things I did not want to name. He was diminished. When he woke, his eyes, usually so black and intense, were clouded with morphine. He was pale. He was tubes and wires and stitches. He was, for the first time, human. I refused to leave. The nurses tried, at first. "Ma'am, you need to sleep." "I sleep here," I said, my voice flat. "He needs his rest. Then I will be quiet." After the 3rd day, they stopped asking. They just brought me an extra pillow and a cup of coffee. I became part of the room. I was the guardian at the gate. I bathed him with a sponge and warm water. I held a cup of ice chips to his cracked lips. I held his hand when the pain medication wore off and he would groan, his eyes squeezed shut, his body rigid. I would just hold his hand, my emerald ring cold against his skin, and I would whisper, "I'm here. I'm right here. You are not alone." While he healed, the world was remade, his organization, his empire. It was in chaos. The attack on the convoy was not just an assassination attempt. It was a declaration of war. The Albanians, believing Dante was dead or crippled, had moved to fill the vacuum. They were wrong. Russo, his arm in a black sling, his face a mask of cold fury, ran the empire from the plastic chair next to mine. Dante would wake, his voice a dry rasp, and give an order. Russo, "Boss, the ports, sell them to the legitimate authority. Now. Today. Boss, that's half our revenue. Sell it." Dante's eyes would close, and Russo would get on the phone. "The plan is accelerated. Liquidate all of it." It was a purge. From his hospital bed, Dante was dismantling the machine he had spent 20 years building. He was cutting off the diseased limbs, the transport division, the enforcement branch. He was selling properties, dissolving holding companies, moving everything into the open, into the light, the Albanians. They vanished. Russo came in one morning, his face grim. He just looked at Dante and nodded. "Once. It is done," Dante whispered. "It is done," Russo said. "They are no longer a factor." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. I knew Marco was gone, and now, the men who had attacked us, they were gone too. That was the last act of the old world. Dante had ordered it, and Russo had executed it, the last bloody piece of business. And in that sterile, quiet room, I found my own purpose. I was not just a nurse. I was not just a fiancé. I was a partner. While Dante slept, I found the files Russo had brought, the ones marked Moretti Foundation, the charity, the shell company. I opened my laptop. I started making calls. "Yes, this is Emily Ruiz, with the Moretti Foundation. I understand you run the St. Angela's shelter for women and children. Tell me, what do you need? A new roof? How much? Consider it done." I became a different kind of force. I was not a killer, I was a builder. Dante was tearing down his dark, bloody past. I was using the spoils to build a future. I funded 3 new wings for women's shelters. I started a scholarship fund for inner-city kids. I was laundering his money. In the truest sense of the word, I was washing it clean. Dante would wake and just watch me. He'd watch me on the phone, arguing with a contractor, demanding a better price for a new gymnasium. One afternoon, I hung up, frustrated. These people, They think because the name is Moretti, they can charge 3 times the price. He smiled. It was the first time I'd seen it in a month. A weak, cracked smile. "You are terrifying, anima mia," he whispered. "I learned from the best," I said, and kissed his forehead. I became his stabilizing influence. I was the bridge from the man he was to the man he was becoming. The old world tried to reach us one last time. A crisp, cream-colored envelope was delivered to the hospital by a pale, terrified-looking process server. It was from Brian. He was suing, not me, Dante. He was suing Dante Moretti for defamation, for emotional distress, for tortious interference with a business relationship, claiming Dante was the reason Kendra's career had been destroyed, and that, by association, his reputation had been ruined. I read the document. I read it twice. And I laughed. It was a cold, sharp, ugly sound. "What is it?" Dante rasped from the bed. "It's Brian," I said. "He's suing you." Dante just looked at me. "Have the lawyers bury him." "No," I said. I stood up. The old Emily, the one from the copper table, would have been terrified. She would have hidden. I was not her. I picked up the phone. I called the lawyers, the clean ones. "Mr. Weiss," I said, "this is Emily Ruiz. I've just received a frivolous lawsuit. I'd like to file a countersuit. Against Mr. Brian, whatever his name is," the lawyer asked, his voice smooth. "Yes, for harassment, for stalking, for breaking and entering, and for assault. I have a witness, Mr. Russo was there when he threatened me. I have the threatening text messages. I have the phone records of his calls. And I have the police report from the incident at my friend Sarah's apartment. He is the reason this all started. I want it handled." I had never used that tone before. It was cold. It was hard. It was Moretti. Brian's lawsuit was dropped within 24 hours. Ours was not. Faced with criminal charges, faced with evidence, faced with the name he was actually fighting, he crumbled. His firm fired him. He was disbarred for moral turpitude. His reputation wasn't just ruined, it was erased, just like Kendra. He had tried to break me in public, and in the end, he was broken, in quiet, legal, devastating silence. I never heard his name again. When Dante was finally released, he was a different man. He was scarred. A long, puckered, angry red line ran down his side, a permanent reminder of the price he had paid. He walked with a slight limp, a stiffness in his stride that I knew, for a man so proud, was its own kind of prison. We did not go back to the penthouse. "I sold it," he said, as Russo helped him into the back of a new, reinforced SUV. "It was a cage. I don't want to live in a cage." He had bought a home, an estate, 20 minutes outside the city, hidden behind a tall, old stone wall in a grove of 100-year-old oak trees. It was a sanctuary. It was a sprawling, beautiful stone house with ivy and fireplaces and gardens. It was a place to live, not just survive. The security was absolute, but it was invisible. Men walked the perimeter, but they stayed out of sight. The gates were iron, but they were elegant. It was a home. We healed. The winter set in. We learned each other. I learned the man who existed without the armor. He was quiet. He was pensive. He read books. He listened to music. He learned to be still, and I learned to be loud. I ran the foundation from a large, sunny office that overlooked the gardens. I was managing a budget of millions. I was powerful. My name, Emily Ruiz. It meant something. It meant hope. One evening, we were in the garden. It was spring. The first crocuses were pushing through the soil. "It's not enough," he said, standing by a dormant rose bush. "What's not enough?" I asked. It's not official. The proposal, that was a declaration of war, a claim. It was for them." He turned to me, and his limp seemed more pronounced. "I want something for us." We held a private engagement ceremony 2 weeks later. It was not a spectacle. It was a promise. We stood in the garden, under the new, green leaves of the oak trees. I wore a simple, cream-colored dress. He wore a simple, dark suit. My only guest was Sarah. Her arm was out of the cast, and she was glowing. The foundation had not only paid for her medical care, It had given her a new job as my executive assistant. She was happy. His only guest was Russo. His arm was out of the sling, and he stood beside Dante, his face, for the first time, not hard. He was proud, a judge. An old friend of Dante's father performed the ceremony. We didn't exchange rings. We already had one. We exchanged vows. He took my hands. "I am not a good man, Emily," he said, his voice thick, his eyes locked on mine. "I have lived in darkness, but you walked into that darkness, and you were a light. You are my conscience, my redemption. I vow to spend the rest of my life being the man you think I am, the man you deserve." I was crying. "Dante, I never wanted a savior," I said, my voice trembling. I wanted a partner. I see you. I see all of you. The darkness, the light, and I love all of it. I vow to be your anchor, to be your home, always." He kissed me. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of peace. That night, we were in our room. The house was quiet. A fire was crackling in the hearth. I had been off for a week. A strange, quiet sickness in the morning, a fatigue that went bone deep. I had blamed the stress, the wedding, the move, but I knew. I had known for a week. He was in his study, the one that was finally just a study, the clean office. He was on the phone with a vineyard in Italy. He was buying, not importing. He was building his dream. I walked in. He hung up. "Is everything all right?" he asked, the shadow of the old fear. It was always there. "Yes," I said. "Dante, we need to talk." He froze. He stood up. "What is it? Is it Brian? Is it—" "No," I said, and I walked over to him. I took his hands, his strong, scarred hands. I couldn't say it. I just took his hand, and I placed it on my stomach. He looked confused. "Emily? I'm pregnant," I whispered. He didn't move. He just stopped. The world stopped. He just stared. His dark eyes. They filled. The man who had killed. The man who had built an empire. He looked terrified. And broken. And full. "What?" he breathed. "I'm pregnant," I said again, a sob catching in my throat. He fell, not collapsed. He knelt in front of me. He knelt, his knees hitting the old Persian rug, his hand, the one on my stomach. He pressed it flat, as if he could feel it. "Emily," he choked out. "I was scared to tell you," I whispered. "With everything, with your past, your wife." He looked up at me, and he was weeping. Silent tears tracing paths down his hard, handsome face. He had lost a child. He had lost everything. "A child," he whispered. He bent his head. He rested his forehead against my stomach, his shoulders. They were shaking. He was not Dante Moretti, the boss. He was a man, a father. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his face still pressed against me. I thought that part of my life was buried, was gone, forever. "It's not," I cried, my hands in his hair. "It's here." He held me, just held me, for I don't know how long. Then he stood. He stood, and he pulled me against him, his arms a fortress. But it was a warm fortress. He looked overwhelmed. He looked reborn. "I will protect you both," he swore. But this time the vow was different. It wasn't a promise of violence. It wasn't a promise of death. It was a promise of life. "I will protect you no matter what. You are my family." Months later, we were back at the copper table. It was different. I was different. I was 7 months pregnant, and I felt powerful. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, the emerald on my finger. It felt light. The restaurant, it was quiet. We walked in, and people, they didn't just stare. They smiled, they nodded. Dante, he wasn't the specter. He was respected. He was the man who ran the foundation, the man who had changed the city. We sat at the same table, the raised one, the throne. We dined quietly. We talked about the baby's room, about names. He was just a man. My man. He took my hand, the one with the ring. He turned it over. He kissed my palm, a soft, warm kiss. He looked into my eyes, the darkness. It was still there, but it wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of me. "You turned the darkest part of my world into something worth living for," he said. Fade to black. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope it brought you on a journey. I would be so honored if you would let me know where in the world you are listening from. Please drop a comment, and if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of dark love and redemption. What did you think of Emily and Dante's story? Share your thoughts. I read every one.